Well, $10,000 and a lot of questions. Earlier this week, we heard from Munther Zeed, who owns 5 food fair stores in Winnipeg. He opened his West Portage location on Good Friday this year, and he was given a $10,000 fine for breaking the law, which he plans to fight. Now, this has started a lot of conversation about why some holidays are considered statutory while others are not. In Canada, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, and Easter Monday are all stat holidays. In Manitoba, in addition, Good Friday is a statutory holiday. All of the holidays have been complicated, however, for my next guest. Stuart Rudner is a Toronto-based employment lawyer. He's written opinion pieces on the subject, and most importantly, he's offered a solution for moving forward. And he joins me now. Good morning.
Oh, good morning, Marcy. Thanks so much for having me on.
So just in your personal story, why are stat holidays complicated in your house?
Oh, I've had the chance to live this. So as an employment lawyer, I advise employers, I advise employees. But in my house, I'm part of a mixed marriage. So we celebrate Christmas and Hanukkah, among others. And it's very obvious the difference. It's Christmas time. The assumption is that my firm will be closed. I'm not getting emails and phone calls from clients. And when I come back, whenever, 26th, 27th, when I come back to the office, there's not a pile of work waiting for me that gathered up while I was gone. Contrast that with Hanukkah, for example, and typically what happens is, I've got work, my wife's got work, our kids are in school, they've got hockey and dance, and probably about 10 o'clock at night, we finally all get together, and we can sort of hurriedly light the candles and then go to sleep and get up for work the next morning. So, and if we want to go and celebrate with my family, of course, it's almost impossible because we don't have a day off to travel. So it's far less convenient. And I don't mean to complain personally, but it is noticeable how differently one religion's holidays are treated than the others. And the reason I've been saying this is an issue for a number of years now in my role as an employment lawyer is we have human rights legislation, which says there should not be any discrimination, there shouldn't be any distinction in employment based upon religion. And yet, as you said a minute ago, one religious group has 2 holidays statutorily protected, or perhaps even more, and nobody else has that. So there's a very clear distinction, which in 2019 doesn't really make sense. And I think it's probably time that we start to address that.
So you actually, in some of the pieces you've written, one that dates back to 2015 that I've looked at specifically, you do offer a solution. What do you think might work?
Well, I've offered solutions, and I will, add the caveat that I don't think one size fits all. But I think, one way to approach this is really to treat everyone equally. So instead of having one religion that has their holidays off by default, and everyone else has to sort of try to find a way to build up time so they can get the day off, treat everyone the same way. So we'll have 2, if 2 is the right number, everyone has 2 floating days that they can use for religious holidays, or if they're not religious, they could use it for cottage day or whatever they choose. And that, at least that way, everyone is treated in the same way, which I think would address most of the concerns. And I can tell you, because I've talked about this a lot, I've been on talk shows, including some in the Maritimes recently, and I've had some pushback from people who've said, well, this is really just another war on Christmas, et cetera. And I don't see it that way at all. As I said, I celebrate Christmas, and I love Christmas. And for the most part, anyone who wants to have Christmas Day off would still have that under my solution. They would just have to essentially declare that's the day they're taking, the same as anybody who wants to take a different day. But for many workplaces where everyone wants to take Christmas off, nothing would really change.
What kind of responses, if you could just elaborate on the responses you've had to your idea since you've been sort of talking about this?
Oh, look, I understand that, we've had a lot of change over the last 20, 30, 40 years, and a lot of people think that there is this, political correctness gone amok, and it's a war on Christian values, and I really don't think that's fair, but I can understand where people are coming from because they see change, and for someone who is used to having Good Friday off by default and Christmas Day off by default, all of a sudden they're hearing that, well, that might change, and they feel as though something's being taken away from them. And I think it's important to understand that nothing's being taken away. It just might be a little bit more of a process. So instead of automatically having Christmas Day, you'll have to tell your employer, I want to have Christmas Day off. And if you do that, then nothing should change. So I don't think people should be upset. And I think for people of different religions, this will make it easier because right now, many people think of themselves as second-class citizens because, they get Christmas off, but I don't get my holiday off. And if I want to take my holiday off, I've got to try to figure out a way to build up overtime, or a lot of times people are told, if you want your day off, that's fine, but you use a vacation day. And people think, well, why is it I have to use a vacation day when somebody else doesn't have to do that for Christmas? Just sort of set the level playing field.
How do you think public opinion has most recently shifted on this conversation?
I think it's an evolving process. It wasn't that long ago that retail stores were closed on Sunday because Sunday was the day when most of us went to church. And of course, I think if you polled most people now, they'd say they want stores to be open on Sunday. So it's a matter of convenience. So I think people are becoming more receptive to the fact that we are going to see change as we become more multicultural. But there still is a lot of pushback. And I think it's also important to realize that we are a big country. And this is a very different issue in downtown Toronto than it is in rural Manitoba. So I think a lot of this comes down to communication. And if your workforce is such that nothing needs to change, then you don't change just for the sake of change. You only change where it's appropriate.
Stuart, thank you for the conversation this morning.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it.
That's Stuart Redner. He's an employment lawyer and mediator. We reached him this morning in Toronto. You can read his opinion piece online on Sunday as it caps off a week where we've been talking about this conversation. And we'll talk about it again because that grocer, Munther Zeed of Food Fair in Winnipeg, who opened Good Friday, is planning on challenging his $10,000 fine. But Stuart Redner's opinion piece is going to be online Sunday at cbc.ca/Manitoba.